So while I'm elbow deep in the guts of a pumpkin, I had a thought, and so I stopped, removed my hands from the guts of the pumpkin, and washed my hands very quickly and set up this little widget to record. But the thought was, most of the problems of theodicy, that being a comprehension or understanding of divinity clear enough, coherent enough, and particular enough to say that we can believe in anything at all. To say that the belief actually constitutes belief. Most of the problems of theodicy are specifically oriented around monotheism. The whole problem of the three omnis. If we get into polytheism, particularly, well, let's use pre-Christian Europe as an example. If we get into polytheism, most of the problems that we're accustomed to arguing about or trying to come up with solutions for regarding theodicy just don't apply. The problems of the omnis, the problems of unlimited power, the problems of unlimited foreknowledge, just don't apply. Because, well, let's say, I was going to say the Celts, but the Celts are actually a really, really bad example, partly because they're incredibly theologically diverse, depending on which region of Europe you're talking about, but also because most, the Iberian Celtic belief systems, the Irish Celts, it's difficult to say that they had gods at all. Or rather, the beings that kind of stand in that role in their myth cycles lack many of the attributes that we generally associate with a supernatural creature. They're more like superhumanist figures. But regardless, most of the problems of theodicy just don't come into play. Even when we are talking about beings with a whole hell of a lot of supernatural attributes associated with them, like, say, the Greek gods. Zeus is not omniscient. So most of the problems regarding prediction, free will, unlimited power, is he capable of acting with an absence of knowledge if he knows all things? Most of the praxis between the three omnis just don't apply at all. We don't really have existential objections to the Greek pantheon, because the character of existence that is proposed for these beings doesn't in and of itself propose any philosophical problems. Zeus would not impose any kind of paradox either on our existence or our understanding of existence by existing. Now, the moment he claims causal authority, or we give him causal authority for something, like the moment we say, one, Zeus exists, okay, we're good so far, no problem. Two, Zeus exists and is responsible for lightning storms. Well, now we've got a problem. Now we've got a problem, because we already have this perfectly good and working meteorological explanation for that phenomenon. That also gives us significant predictive authority, which the ownership of the phenomenon by Zeus does not. And it seems like lightning storms tend to work more according to the meteorological model than the pissed-off Greek model. So we have a problem the moment that we give him that kind of causal authority, or say Zeus impregnates women while taking the form of a golden mist. Yes, I did narrowly avoid that. Anyway, we've got some other problems. We've got some ideas regarding how impregnation works, how the human reproductive system works, and for the most part, it does not involve sex with barely tangible atmospheric phenomena. So, again, we run into problems when we start talking about these gods doing something, but we don't really have a problem with them existing per se. If we get away from the kind of the Greek model, where you have figures that are representatives of both naturalistic and humanistic forces, and kind of move into, well, I don't know, like something like the Proto-Chin model, where you've got where you have divine administrators, or representatives of, that aren't necessarily, responsible for, but they have some kind of middle management role in the operation of the universe, wherein their exact responsibilities and exact powers are a little on the vague side. Yeah, well, that vagueness gives us a lot of room to work with. It gives us a lot of room in which we can say, well, maybe not. Maybe not. It's certainly not necessary for our understanding of the universe, but on the other hand, our understanding of the universe doesn't give us a flat-out definite no regarding the claim that somewhere there is maybe not a pissed-off Greek who is directly responsible for thunderstorms, but a wizened old Chinese accountant who is responsible for keeping track of thunderstorms. We've got a little more room to make allowances there. I just find it interesting that, and I may talk more about this later, most of, despite the fact that this isn't what we focus on, we spend a lot of time talking about, specific claims of action or of characteristic, but the biggest problem that we have philosophically with a monotheistic system is the fundamental existential claim, and especially the existential claim of singularity. That's where most of our problems come from. That's where most of the difficulty comes from. But on the other side of it, that's also where most of the energy for philosophical and conceptual development historically has come from. The proposition of a singular and single God puts in the realm of the abstract, well, and first it lends the realm of the abstract a sense of urgency and immediacy that justifies engagement with it, even when immediate gains aren't necessarily apparent. But also, it sets the field up in such a way that we have to ask certain kinds of questions to get our heads around this proposition of there is one, and it is on this tripod of the three omnis, and we do have to come to a sufficient reconciliation with those problems to be able to say that a belief claim is actually meaningful or is intellectually coherent. That puts us in a position of dealing with abstraction versus representation, with the structure of symbol, meaning, proposition, linguistic construct. It basically kind of lays the groundwork for the last 400, 500 years of tit-for-tat Western philosophical development. Western philosophy, and thus formal mathematics, logic, and you could kind of go on from there, would not have developed along the same lines if it was not occurring in this culture that had this Theodoxicological? Theodosic? I'm not sure what the right word there is. Hey, mark your calendars. This Theodicy problem. We wouldn't have developed in the same way. We wouldn't have developed the same tools. We certainly wouldn't have developed them in the same order or with the same notion of correlation between different propositions that we currently have. So yeah, I find that very interesting, and I'll probably go back to this kind of the problem of an existential proposition for God, because it's a really interesting question. And you know what? I honestly do not care most of the time where you stand on the existence of God or the non-existence of God. Generally, your personal behavior is far more important to me. But I do feel pretty strongly that regardless of where one stands on the issue, it is a question that merits taking seriously. If only because it is one of the most, does God exist, is one of the most profound, just as a question it is profound, but intensely challenging, and going, no, or yeah, you're cheating yourself and kind of missing the point. So I think I'm going to return to that question after I get back to gutting this pumpkin. It was a dick. It deserves this.